Hey folks, Michael Phillips. I'm here with Engine 31, the pop-up newsroom sponsored by USC, covering this year's Humana Festival of New American Plays. And one of the things that we're going to be doing in terms of video is talking to people at intermission or before the play, if there is no intermission, about different issues kind of on their minds about the American theater and their role in it. And one of the folks we're going to be talking to is a director this year, Lila, who said something very, very provocative, I thought, on a panel today of all the directors in this year's festival. And she said audiences, in her experience with new work, will put up with all sorts of controversial content and provocative material as long as the play itself is straight up naturalism, realism, realistic set, familiar characters, that sort of thing. But the minute you start monkeying with the form and structure and go in a more experimental vein, it's a challenge, and audiences, for whatever reason, may not be willing to go with a playwright when they go in that direction. And I asked her to follow up on that because I wanted to hear more.
There had been a question from the audience about how, as a director of new plays, do you negotiate the kind of needs and interests of your audience? And my experience, simply I think based on some of the work that I've ended up doing, has been that what I think audiences have found most challenging about the material I happen to end up working on is that formal experimentation or non-traditional structures or styles have posed a greater challenge to audiences than content. It just happens to be in the work that I've done, and I think a part of that is, I don't know if there's this great Jeff Jones article from 2005 about the ways in which the theater hasn't done a great job of educating its audience about form in the way that the visual arts have given people a kind of manual for looking at things like abstract expressionism.
Right. Why will people not put up with the theatrical equivalent of abstract expressionism? Because in the 80s, you had this moment where Jeffrey Jones had a lot of plays being done, including things like 70 Scenes of Halloween, which got a lot of productions, and then much more difficult material like, Mac Wellman, the early Susan Laurie Parks plays a little later. You don't find these plays on regional stages anymore. Why, right? I'm right.
I wish I had the answer. I think that, I would actually, I don't know what the why is. What I do think is that I feel like in the contemporary climate, I feel like part of my job right now as an artist is to begin to think about how to give audiences a way into that kind of work, or to hopefully make some sort of an argument that when you feel challenged by something at a purely formal level, that some degree of frustration or impatience or alienation or disorientation in your experience as a spectator might have value. That moments of discomfort or feeling totally on the outside of what's happening, in which you don't feel like the contract is clear, may have value. I think not always. Hopefully, if the piece has a degree of integrity and ultimate purpose in what it's doing with formal experimentation, we can find a way into that. I just think it's just a challenge.
I've been coming to the Humana Festival just on and off across 3 different decades, and it is remarkable, depending on who's running the shop, on how straightforward, meat and potatoes, 4 characters, 1 set, comedies, whatever, 1 year, and then it's a very different climate depending if 10 years goes by, maybe the budgets get very tight, there's a recessionary kind of clenched atmosphere. How can we interpret this? What are we to do about it?
Well, I guess all I would say to that is that I think I feel really elated to be at this particular Humana Festival under the leadership of Les Waters, who I think has a history of championing the voices of playwrights who are writing in somewhat unconventional and non-traditional forms. I think he's a person who's invested in what a degree of formal experimentation, what the role of that is in the theater. I think Mallory Avedon, who I'm collaborating with here, is as much investigating the nature of the contract between performer and spectator. I think that's part of what this piece is very much about, as much as it's about the experience of its protagonist and the sort of subjects as they come to bear.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing it.
Sure.
Good. Well, that's very good.
Cool.
Thank you.
I wish I had the insights or the answers.
I don't know.
I'm just trying to, make it.
I mean, those of us
make the forms.
I know. I mean, I'm older than you. I mean, those of us who were there was a weird moment in the 80s when a lot of playwrights of an unlikely degree of formal risk were getting a lot of productions, and the audiences necessarily maybe they didn't come with them as far as they didn't come with them as far as the directors and the playwrights would like.
I actually think a huge part of it is how are we preparing audiences to enter work like that? And maybe a part of it is that we have to be giving them a more expansive toolbox for why something that feels potentially impenetrable, like how they can listen to it.
Explain, just in terms of production materials, dramaturgical materials, how do we help these people?
Maybe. I mean, I think maybe on some level it's about, God. Well, I mean, there needs to be some like quorum of the artistic directors of the world. I think a part of it may be dramaturgical materials. I feel like it's some conversation. You know, the theater has a way of being somewhat insular in our conversations about the work, and I guess the question is like, how do we begin to have larger conversations with our audiences? That's something I feel like I would have to think more carefully about to tell you like what I think the actual strategies for that are. I think it begins with some dialogue with audiences about the forms of theater. I'll have to think about some tips and get back to you. Yeah.
I've been puzzling about that for years. They'll do it with visual art and they'll do it with music. And they've said for some reason when it comes to storytelling, there's a 51% of the world that just won't come along yet, unless maybe the production is so crafty, it pulls them into a world that they find disorienting.
Sure, and I actually think more than ever now, I think we need theatrical. I think we need the theater to tell stories in ways that only the theater can. I mean, like, we don't need to go to the theater for a story that can be told in a particular way on television or in film, right? Like, I think we need to be like, you know what I'm getting at.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
That was great.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks, great to meet you.
Good luck. Look forward to your show.
Thanks.